What's good, everybody? I'm Token Drew. I'm the person who's rapping in the background, and I'm the person who's drawing on this video as well. So I'm going to show you guys my whole process on how I do pictures, and hopefully someone can come into the comments and teach me some new shit. So as you can see, what I do is I start out with the basic shapes, just to get the pose right, just to get the position, how I want the picture to go. I never feel like I have enough space on this digital format. But anyway, once I decide how the position is going to be, I start doing some line work using some of the pencils. Speaking of which, I am using Clip Studio Paint on a Wacom Cintiq 22 tablet. So what I'm doing here is I'm pretty much filling in the body. There's another step you can do in between doing the lines and doing this, and I kind of blend it together where you're like adding thicker shapes. But I just go right into this. Now I do this on a vector layer. What a vector layer does is it enables you to alter different points. That's what, whenever you see a whole bunch of little dots, all of a sudden me manipulating something, and it enables you to manipulate it without losing any quality. Whereas if you were to use a raster layer or whatever, and use the lasso tool, you'll lose some of your quality. Stuff will start to look fuzzy when you start to rescale it. Using the object tool, I can move the whole picture around and edit whatever I need to. So when I was doing this part, I realized that my lines looked a little bit jagged. So what I ended up doing, I edited this part out. What I ended up doing was going into the settings and changing the resolution from 600 DPI to 1200 DPI. But if anybody knows a better workaround to get these lines smooth, please let me know. Let me know. So I'm not sponsored at all, just so you guys know. But I definitely recommend this program. It is super in-depth. There's so much you can do with it that, I'm still learning. Pretty much every single picture I do, I'm learning something new. And, you can do stuff like, if you see me resizing and rescaling the head just to get it a little bit better. I was really trying to mimic the picture on the side, but I ended up just doing my own thing to it, which I feel like makes it better because I feel like it's a bit more mine. Yeah, trying to be a little bit too flashy with the leg over there. This beat right here was made by my dude Kyle Lotto from Auto Labs, by the way, out here in Cincinnati. Awesome dude. I recorded all my shit with him off this project and my whole last project too. Good stuff. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually going back through and I'm thickening the lines up around the outside of him, and I started to add the tendrils. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to add some of his Sharpie things too, the tentacles and whatnot. So now I'm going through on a different layer and I'm adding detail. And I always do my detail on a different layer because when I add my paint, I take the detail away and then add the detail back on top. That way the paint, I don't have to struggle with trying to fill in whatever little scritchy scratch marks I do. But adding these little details, adding these little notches and stuff just gives these things more life. Now what that wheel is over there, that is the Wacom's control wheel. Because the way I have my keyboard set up, it is on the ground, not on the ground, it's like on top of the computer at my legs, and because I don't have a proper desk just yet, but I will when I move. So I accomplished this by using the lasso tool, pretty much to fill, you put out your shape and then select the fill option to fill that in. You're gonna see me mess with the opacity a couple times just to check to see how it looks. I'm not gonna lie, it is really weird watching myself draw. This is my homie Cryptic T. Me and him's in a rap group, the Death Dealers, so you hear a lot of our music together. Fun fact, I had never drawn Carnage before. But I'm like, this would be a fun time to do it for this. And I might be doing this more often. You know, I might be doing uh, more speed drawings of thumbnails, drawing my own thumbnails. So after I added the ink, I was like, what am I going to do to bring out the color more? Like bring inspirations out of flat black. Well, I guess I'll get to that in a second. I'm supposed to do that after this. So here I took away the detail and the ink that I was doing and started adding the red. And I made a blue background so that way I can see if there were any holes. Now there's something that people do where they add like this weird gray layer. And I'm not really sure what that is or how they do that. So if anybody has any pointers, please let me know because I would love to learn what that step is. But anyway, I digress. What I did here was I took the highlighter tool and started adding some highlights on the ink. And doing that, it naturally made it to where it looked like light. I didn't really even have to blend the edges of it, even though I ended up taking my blend tool and adding that blend to it. Now, in retrospect, I feel like maybe I added too much ink, you know, but I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. So I'm doing here, I like to do this with all my pictures nowadays, is I will use the highlighter tool and I will start adding some base shading and highlights to the skin, and I will blend that in to try and give it more texture. With Carnage, it was just red, just adding a deeper red. But if I'm doing like skin tone, from what I'm teaching myself this, you know, because I learned all this shit from years of anime, but I would take like blues and purples and greens and add that to black people's skin, or take yellows and orange, red and pink, add it to white people's skin to try and make it a bit more robust. So here I am starting on Venom. Now, I've drawn Venom so much as a youth, but I'm used to drawing the comic book Venom. This Venom is different. This Venom was weird for me, and I really was struggling with his eye for a bit. But eventually I got it to a point where I'm like, you know what, I like this, I need to move on. Because when I start struggling too much on a certain point in a picture, I will do one of two things. I'll either spend way too much time on it, or I will eventually just be like, you know what, this is what it is, it's not going to be perfect, and I move on. But once again, I always work on vector layers. Now I switch from a vector layer to a raster layer when I want to add in details such as like with the inking process I did on Carnage. Because you can't color stuff in on a vector layer. Makes sense because vectors are all the little points that you have to toy with. Now I do like how the movies added in that kind of raptor, whatever the hell it's called on the side of the mouth of like lizards or like dinosaurs, or that weird, you know what I'm saying, that extendable shit. The T-Rex from Jurassic Park was the first one I ever saw with it. I like them adding that to Venom and Carnage. That was a very, very wise design choice, if you ask me. Which you might not have asked me, but you're going to know my view on it anyway, motherfucker. So here, what I do is, as I'm doing my other picture, I will add in my previous layer just to make sure the stuff is lining up correctly. You know, I don't want it to be disproportionate or anything, and I start coloring, I have to change everything. Because once you start getting that color in, rescaling it is difficult. And most of the time, you're going to have to just recolor. Shh. I'm recording, Hope. Silence. Now, Venom's head was really hard to get the scale right, because what I did for his body is I used the symmetry tool to make both sides the same size. And unfortunately, I hadn't used the symmetry tool when I was doing the head because I really don't know how to work that tool for angles. But it kind of gave him a small head. Now, similar to like how I was doing Carnage's bit with his black symbiote inking part, this is how I did Venom's, using the same method. Except this time I decided I'm going to add the classic Venom symbiote logo in the front instead of just a collection of random veins. Just another thing to make it a bit more unique, a bit more mine. And personally, I feel like that's one thing this Venom suit was missing, was that traditional Spider-Man logo, even though it makes sense why this Venom does not have that. but my Venom that I'm drawing sure as hell does. So continuing with the veins over here, and like all the veins are just like little branch looking things, at least the way I draw them. Once I had them down the way that I wanted them to be, I started to pretty much just fine tune them and start adding some detail, just detail around the muscles, just a couple lines here and there, just to make it not look as boring. So now the first thing I decided to do on this before I added the black was to add the white, because once you start adding that huge black color, it makes adding other colors difficult. Don't ask why, that's just how it is. Now with this tongue, I was initially trying to do the top part light and the bottom part dark and just blend the two together, but that blend was not happening the way that I wanted it to happen. So instead I just made it all one color and decided I'm just going to fix that when I do the shading process here in a bit. And then back to my blue background so that way I can make sure I can see this white marks that I made. And now using the paint bucket tool is where I'm adding not pitch black, because I want to add shading, so I add something close to it, something like a charcoal black, where you can still see the lines and the details. You know, flat black is just no fun. And now, just like with Carnage, I'm going through and I'm going to start adding, well actually I started adding more lines over here because I realized that the shoulder wasn't quite even. And then I'm going to start adding the texturing where I'm doing the darker color. And I also moved Carnage's file to where Venom was below that file, which meant he was in the foreground. I moved it to where Carnage was below Venom, so that way Carnage can be seen more. Or Carnage was above Venom, so that way, because whatever's your top file is your file that is in the foreground. You can see down in the leg area and over in the abs where I'm adding in this shading, and this is what I'm going to do with my blending tool just to make it pop out a little bit more. And using my blending tool is where I go through and just smear it a little bit just to, like I said before, not leave those obvious curved lines and everything. So this is my first time doing this, adding this white highlight to the muscles. And like when I started adding it, I was like, oh, hell yeah, I like the way this looks. And now I'm taking Carnage and taking that same lightness, and I'm doing the same thing to him, seeing how that turns out. And I'm liking it. I'm like, you know, I'm going to keep this. I should have seen back then, though, that I added too much of the shine to his chest, but I really like how the tendril on his tail goes. So here's how I do the shading. What I do first is I add a corrective layer with darker lighting, and then I erase the whole thing, and using the fill tool, I fill in where I want the shading to be. And I'll do that with 2 levels of darkness, and I'll do 1 level with light. And there's 2 different ways you can do it. You can either do it with brightness, which is under the brightness and contrast option on Clip Studio Paint, or you can use the hue, saturation, and luminosity. From what I can tell, it seems like the luminosity lightens up all of the colors, like physically lightens them, whereas brightness does as it's told, just makes everything brighter. So I kind of alternate between the two, but either way, I make sure to use my blend tool again and go along the edges just to make sure they're smooth. And it's always good to do your figures on different layers, so that way you can take them away, you can move them, you know, and how you can move them all easy at once. You add them all to one folder, and then you can move everything. And you know, just finishing up the touches, final touches, adding the lighting bit. Lighting I always do last. Then the light blending is what I'll do after that. And I'll typically zoom in just to make sure that everything is correct, because it really sucks when you spend hours on something and you're like, oh no, I did something wrong. Then it's got a background of San Francisco. Turn the was it Gaussian blur up to about 40%. Took the spray paint tool, added a highlight behind them, imported in my logo and imported in the title, and there you go. And that's how I did this picture. So thanks for checking it out. I'll be doing this again soon. Hope you guys like it. Peace out.